Hello, everybody. This is episode 52 of Artificial Intelligence and Cyber Surgery, the official podcast for our journal, Artificial Intelligence Surgery. I'm here with my co-host, Professor Vincent Grasso, who will introduce our next guest, who I'm very excited to talk to, a little bit different from some of our other guests, and you'll find out why. Take it away, Vincent.
Fantastic. Thanks. Hi, Francesca. This is Vincent Grasso, and we have the pleasure of having Professor Francesca Delmat on today. She's a senior lecturer in strategic management, accounting, and healthcare management at the Università Foscari in Venezia. So she is not a physician, as she's stated, but she works heavily on the other side of the equation. So welcome to our podcast, Francesca.
Thank you so much. It's really a pleasure being here. Thanks for inviting me.
I am very impressed by your English, because when we met, where were we in Italy again? Somewhere down south. Were we in Bari? I think so.
No, I don't really think so.
Where were
No,
we?
not
Remember where
really.
we were? Where were we?
Actually, I don't really think we haven't met in person. So we have some chats online, but I've just started to attend, surgical conferences and events. So that's pretty new to me.
Interesting.
So,
The senility is setting in. We'll have to talk about this more. But please tell me what you do at Venice, the most beautiful city in the world. Please explain. Yeah.
okay. So, I really love organization, and I study healthcare management from a managerial perspective because, as you said correctly, I'm not a medical doctor. So I have a degree in business and management and one in law, so completely a different background. But when you deal with organization and processes, you definitely must know at least a little bit of what technically happens inside the organization that you are trying to study. So since I'm really that much into healthcare, I really love healthcare, I love medicine, I love surgery. So I had to learn a little bit. And this kind of cross-fertilization with you guys, so with colleagues from medicine and surgery, is so interesting to me. So that's why I started to work with physicians, with surgeons, and try to, let's say, apply my topics. So, for example, new technologies into a different world, but with a different perspective. So that's basically what I do. And I really like surgery. I like HPB that much. I like trauma and emergency, for example. And I really love to see how these disciplines are changing, of course, from an organizational perspective. So what's new inside organizations?
So I'm trying to remember our common friend. Is it Isabella Frigieri?
Isabella, yes,
Okay, so I'm not.
definitely.
I
Yes,
haven't completely lost my mind. Okay, great.
So we were in a study together, if you remember, the PUECO, about the organizational factors of the new pancreas units, because this is something new that we have in Italy from a policy perspective. So it's something that really had to organize, and a multidisciplinary perspective was much needed. So not only from all the medical specialties, but also including, let's say, managers and experts in organization sciences. That's why I was involved.
So, I've worked in the United States, I've worked in Europe, and the managerial side, I've noticed in Europe is getting more and more like in the United States. And many studies have shown actually that when doctors run hospitals, I'm sure these are biased studies, but and please correct me if I'm wrong, but some studies, I should say, have shown that when doctors run hospitals, they actually are more cost effective or cost saving. And in France, what I've learned is things kind of changed around the time of Sarkozy. He brought in an entire level of management that now has to be paid. And sometimes when I walk around them, I see them all on their computer doing Lord knows what, while the doctors are running around and seeing patients. Now, I did a fellowship in Italy years ago, but But can you explain to me, at least in your way of understanding, how management is changing in Italy? I believe in Italy, even in Italy, it's becoming more and more of a private system. And if you think that's a good thing, if you think that's a bad thing, kind of your thoughts on it, I think would be very helpful for people to, I always find it fascinating how healthcare is done in different parts of the world.
Yes, sure. So, in my understanding, you guys, especially surgeons, you are definitely so much in love with what you do. You really like enjoying staying in the OR, saving lives, working with patients. And when someone, let's say, gets an upgrade in the career, it means that that person must be, let's say, a little bit less a surgeon and more of a manager. But the difference that I see is that when you deal with surgery, there's so much technique that you must know. That's why I really feel ignorant when I talk to you guys, because I don't know much of what to do. It's very difficult, at least the way I see it. The problem is that management is not that difficult, but it is difficult indeed. But the fact is that when I talk about management with someone, if I'm good at talking, that someone will probably understand what I say, okay, which does not really happen reverse when I talk to a surgeon and a surgeon tries to explain to me. But the fact is that when you're not, let's say, 100% a surgeon and longer, and you must be a manager, it means that you must be fully aware, for example, of team dynamics, of human resource management, of a lot of non-technical skills, and that's pretty difficult. So that's why, for example, in Italy, those like surgical chiefs, they are elected because of their surgical curriculum most of the time. So if they are very good surgeons, if they are renowned, then they are upgraded as chiefs. But the problem is that once they are chiefs, they must know about business and management. And today we are experiencing lots of issues, as you are correctly saying, Andrew. For example, the fact that we must be cost effective. We must know, for example, if I use a surgical robot or if I want to implement a new technology into my department, I must be fully aware about, for example, not only the medical outcomes, but what those outcomes might mean for the hospital. I need to have like budget responsibilities. I need to report to the governance of my hospital what I am doing and why I'm doing that. If I want to hire someone, I really need to explain why. So that's difficult. So sometimes
Especially
like
for surgeons who are terrible communicators.
definitely, it's very difficult. And most of these, let's say, new managers, like surgical managers, they are sent back to classes and courses, but we cannot take for granted that they really like this kind of managerial things. So, it's becoming more and more difficult. And I think that this actually couples with the fact that also medicine in general terms is changing that much. So, for example, it's not multidisciplinarity as I see it. It's not only about among medical specialties as it was meant before, like in oncology, for example, but today you really must know and discuss, for example, with ICT managers, with bioengineers, and why not also with economists, and accountants. And that's really difficult because, language is also difficult, as you said, and communication is not so straightforward. So you really we need to find a common path, a common ground to find a way to cooperate in an effective way, because the aim is the same for everybody. So the fact that we must have these very good hospitals where patients are happy, they get very good clinical outcomes, but it comes from, several sources, let's say.
So I agree with you completely. That the level of technology that is coming out, in the last 20 years has really been staggering. And it is, what I have noticed is when you do have heads of services in Europe, they're so busy that is with managing that they essentially stop operating. I mean, which is, I think a problem, which is why I do think, of course, a level of managers is definitely welcome. How do you see AI or advancements helping with your job? Like, how do you see it impacting what you do?
Okay, so that's a very good question. So, uh, at Venice Foscarin, we study technology pretty a lot. The fact is that what we see is that the change which is happening in so many disciplines and industries is so fast that really we cannot keep up. So even the applications, the practical applications that we have and we can really use, they tend to be old because there is always something new that we need to learn. We need to understand how to really translate all of this into real practice. And no matter what kind of disciplines we are talking about. So for example, what we are studying is, for example, how this couples with sustainability, which is another important topic. So for example, how we can facilitate a twin transition, to use technologies that at the same time can enhance both environmental and social sustainability. So I actually don't use artificial intelligence that much in my job. If you think about my job in a traditional way. So, for example, when I teach with students, or when I study, or when I write papers and articles, for example. But this is for sure something which is worth studying. So I really love studying artificial intelligence, and I think there's so much that it's going to happen very soon. So it's really exciting, but at the same time, we must be very fast because we cannot keep up otherwise.
So this brings me to that case I was telling you guys before we started recording, and I want to see a little bit how things would be handled in Europe as opposed to there in America. Basically, because of social media, there is a surgeon in Florida. People even seem to have his op report, where was doing a splenectomy for
Okay, I get
uh,
it.
for a
Till
patient.
this, I get it.
Yeah, for a patient that had a bleeding from a splenic cyst, and
Okay,
basically the patient didn't do well, and the surgeon removed the spleen, and when they
okay,
sent it to pathology, it turns out that the surgeon removed the liver. So
okay. Well, that
so
seems
as
very bad.
so as Vincent, so I'm glad I have Vincent's expression recorded, because for as surgeons we know, ironically, to remove the liver is actually quite a difficult procedure, but the patient didn't survive, so I guess it's not that
Mhm.
it's not that. I'm just going to shy away from what I was
Okay,
implying. But what I'm trying to get at is, it turns out, apparently, again, this is all from social media. Apparently, the surgeon also had a problem with removing, during an adrenalectomy, actually ended up removing part of the pancreas several years before. So I'm wondering, is there any way, any database in Italy that could have maybe flagged someone like this, that could have alerted management, like, look, this person needs more training, needs supervision, there's a problem. This surgeon apparently has been working for 14 years. It's very hard for Vincent and I to fathom making that kind of mistake. He even said, I think in the op report, that the spleen was enlarged and on the right side of the abdomen. I mean, it sounds almost like, I hope in a few days they tell us this was all like The Onion. The Onion is a satirical journal that they write
Mhm.
articles that are fake. We're almost hoping that this is all going to turn out to be fake. But how would this be dealt with in Italy? Would this be on social media? I mean, this happened, I don't know how long ago. I could probably check the date on the op note. It seems insane to me that, the complication is horrible, but the fact that the path report has been published, the op report has been published, it seemed, this poor, the patient's life, it just seems so horrible on so many levels. I would like to hear how something like this would pan out in Italy.
Well, first of all, Well, this is very good for lawyers,
Yeah.
they might claim lots of money out of that. The fact is that, if we think about the national healthcare system in Italy now is mostly public, you know. So although the medical responsibilities in Italy is very big, it's very massive, so it's probably worse than in other countries on the one side. On the other hand, we may consider that once someone is really hired in a public system, so it doesn't really matter what kind of job you do, you are like a civil servant, most likely you would stay, you know. So it's
Even
unfortunately what I
even
hear from
after
colleagues.
even after this type of complication, you would still not lose your
But
job.
I think it's most likely, yes, you would stay. And to be honest with you, I work with a lot of medical doctors in Italy, and when they like talk to me about what they do and like the team, I got to know the persons after a while because they mentioned them. We do know that there are doctors that are definitely and surgeons that are definitely better than others. And so what they design is that an organization which, for example, very complicated cases are handled or difficult cases are handled by the same persons, which is not fair to me because, the fact is that if you're better than another one, at least you should be paid more, or you have more responsibilities. So you should get awards for that, you know.
Yeah.
But it's, I'm not really sure to what extent these might change in the future or not, because this is, very like old policies that are definitely difficult to be,
Yeah.
changed. And moreover, in Italy, we have another issue today is that we have uh, probably fewer medical doctors that we need. So the fact is that they hire everybody. So in the past, it was much more challenging. I remember that when I had to pick the university, the faculty that I wanted to attend, medicine at the time, so it was like 20 years ago, was not really an appealing choice because everybody would warn you, it's very long in terms of the number of years that you must study. And once you are done, it's going to be very difficult to find a place to be hired. And today it's completely different. So as soon as residents, they finish their residency period, they are hired immediately, even before finishing. And not all of them are really prepared, and they are sent to the field, they are sent to the patients, and it might be that sometimes they don't know what to do, especially those who go to, let's say, smaller hospitals. Sometimes they don't even have a senior that can support them and guide them.
Yeah.
So I know how much time you guys need to be very good surgeons. This happens actually in most jobs, not all the jobs, because maybe like information systems is a bit different as a job, because you might be like 15 years old and you can be just perfect, and ready to work,
Yeah.
and even better than like senior engineers. But definitely, if you're a medical doctor, you need time to be trained, you need guidance, even if, after residency. And so this is very weird because if you don't have people, if you don't have workers, you can
Yeah.
even not pick the right one. So that's really
You,
that's
you know,
really bad.
my mind is I always learn so much from these podcasts. My mind is exploding now about the value of augmented reality in the operating room. Because
Mhm.
Vincent and I, it seems nice, but we use CT scans, we know how to do our operations. We we don't, I don't know, we know how to do surgery without augmented reality, but listening to you and hearing about all these poor young surgeons that are being forced to operate, and maybe the same thing is happening in the United States. Maybe that would explain, what happened to that case I was discussing. Vincent, how do you see AI, impacting this case I told you about and impacting the fact that, surgical training isn't what it used to be? I mean, we all know. I mean, it's hard for us to imagine removing the liver by accident. I mean, that is a hard, we all hear cases where they remove the wrong leg. There was even there's a famous case at a big cancer center in New York. You know, apparently the patient came in with a cancer of their eye, and the other eye was removed. You know, so wrong-sided surgery is a well-known phenomena. And you know, Vincent and I can at least envision how that could happen, but removing the liver, Vincent, help me understand what happened and how that can be prevented with AI.
It's an interesting, sad story. When I was third-year surgical resident, I was called to the OR for a difficult laparoscopic cholecystectomy case. And when I scrubbed in, I looked at the monitor and things looked very weird. And the surgeon was dissecting the right upper quadrant. It looked like the spleen. It was yelling at everyone. I didn't know what was going on. Finally, I said, please stop, pull the laparoscope back. And we just scanned the abdomen, and the liver was on the left side.
Right.
And this young girl had situs inversus.
Right.
And then I asked the anesthesiologist, I said, how do the heart sound on the left side? Because the heart's probably on the right.
Yeah.
And then he said, you better be quiet. So, you know, so everything got very quiet. We did the case. You know, luckily he didn't dissect out and do a splenectomy, but
Wow.
There was the problem of tunnel vision, where you believe you see what you want to see sometimes,
Right.
and you can get very frustrated, and you get deeper and deeper into the rabbit hole, and you got to pull out. Somebody has to help pull you out. So what I love about this conversation is, you know, computer vision on a diagnostic laparoscopy provides the surgeon with perhaps a whole roadmap of where things are supposed to be, correlating with the CAT scan, giving that surgeon that doesn't have a lot of support, all of a sudden on his or her screen can be this kind of aid, surgical aid, like an overseer helping you, you know, identify anatomical structures, etc. You could never make the same mistake if there was computer vision involved when you're doing removing the liver and you think you're doing a splenectomy, right? That would almost be impossible.
Yeah.
You know, the alerts would just be ringing off the chart, you know,
Right.
stop.
Spleen.
So,
you know, it'd be like liver,
yeah.
liver, you know, contraindication, liver. So situs inversus,
Yeah.
Francesca, is when things are on the other side of your body. You can't tell by looking at somebody, but as a surgeon, when you look inside, things on the right or on the left, everything is you know, I've done a few gallbladders on situs inversus. It's not easy. It's tricky on the mind, for sure.
You're right. Augmented reality and computer vision, you know, really would help that surgeon in a small Italian hospital where they don't have a lot of oversight. And, you know, and then telesurgically being able to guide them if they needed. They could call in, I need some help. You know, you could broadcast in through a telesurgical consultation. So we have the technology to do this. It's just the bureaucracy is still in the way, right?
Yeah, I would love, I mean, AI could pick up problem surgeons. I mean, like you were discussing, Francesca, if, you know, a certain surgeon had many complications, you know, if that's, and I know how Italy works, and I know how many countries work, if that surgeon knows the right people, things get brushed under the rug, you know? But if there's an independent mind, an independent AI that can say, look, this person has a problem, or this person shouldn't do this operation, you know, people are scared by this. People are scared because of sexism and racism and all things like this. But you know, knowledge is power. Knowledge does not scare me. You know, at least you have an unbiased, or let me say, at least you have it's hard because algorithms are written by people with biases, right? So that's a whole other problem. But at least you have another source of evaluating people, and that's kind of what excites us about AI. You know, so
Yeah. You know, if I can add something, is that, you know, we tend to think that if when someone is young, or at least younger, you know, those like millennials, they are, and Gen Z, they are born with technology. So they should be technology enthusiasts. But in a study that I did with my colleagues, with the support, with the endorsement of the World Society of Emergency Surgery, we actually we try to assess if surgeons would be willing to really use artificial intelligence. What we found out is that there was no correlation, for example, with age. And that was very weird to us because we thought, if you are young, then, every new technological solution would at least look exciting to you. But that was not the case. We found that there was a strong connection, for example, with countries, because in some countries, all the respondents, regardless of the role that they had, like from chiefs to senior consultants up to residents, were enthusiastic. In some other countries, they were they had a lot of doubts and they were not ready for that. So this is another thing, because I totally agree with you guys, because I love technology, so I would be ready to like use and see what the potentials are. But sometimes we are really stuck in some situations in which it's very difficult to adopt technologies, new technologies. And another issue that I see, for example, in Italy, but not only in Italy, but there's a way to mitigate that, is that technology is not always available. And sometimes, for example, hospitals, they are ready to make big investments in technology. But once, for example, they buy something, it stays forever because you really need to repay the investments,
Oh, yes.
But, when you have this kind of technology, the fact is that, the technology is probably old. So the way to mitigate that is that, from what I can see now, technology providers, they have changed recently their business model, so that, for example, they rather rent, for example, the equipment instead of selling it, or they give it for free and you just pay, all the, yes, or whatever, for every operation you pay whatever you need to pay. But this is, this is very interesting, because the extent in which technology is accepted is really, we cannot give it for granted. So it's something that, from my perspective, so from social science perspective, is definitely worth studying, because it depends on a variety of factors. It depends, for example, of the performance that you expect from something. It depends on the effort that you think you need to, extra effort. The surgeons are so busy, they already have huge workloads. So if I put extra training, extra effort, they should believe it's definitely worth it, because otherwise they won't do that. It depends on the social influence. So, for example, if all your colleagues abroad, you go to a congress and everybody else is using that technology, then you probably want the technology as well. And even the facilitating condition, So it's, so it's very complicated. So it's been fascinating, because that's probably the path. So we are going, artificial intelligence is definitely topical, is so important, but we must ensure, the adoption, to me, from what I see, from my perspective, is not that easy. We have a lot of issues that we need to explore and see what kind of policies, training, dissemination we need to make to ensure that colleagues worldwide are happy to use it, because they say they are, but indeed they have a lot of resistance. They have a lot of barriers that most of times they're not able to overcome. So it's very fascinating.
Yeah, a lot of doctors are very, very busy. I'm always impressed about the amount of work I see that doctors.
Yes, the workload is huge.
The workload is
Yeah.
massive. It's reminds me of working with Doctors Without Borders in a war zone many times, and so much paperwork and no support and everything. And the reality is that doctors don't have time to learn about AI. They have a very superficial understanding of it. It's one of the reasons why we started the journal. It's one of the reasons why we started the podcast, because we need more and more doctors to understand it, to get interested in it, excited in it, and to control, not control it, but to be not
yes,
be
to get your hands dirty, we say.
Yeah, absolutely.
Get your hands dirty into AI and see what you know, it's definitely work, but it's not immediate. So, you know, it's
Yeah.
for most people, professionals, it's still something unknown. It's exciting because they, oh, everybody is talking about AI, but once you need to apply it, it takes time to really understand and,
I
you
I
know, to
I
dig deeper.
I really like that expression. You get to get your hands dirty, you know, especially with AI.
Definitely.
Because it's true. It's, you know, it's not easy. And, you know, and I've completed a master's and starting a PhD in it. And it's fascinating, and it's as difficult and mentally challenging as medical school, you know, easily. So Vincent, we're coming to the end of our, let me see, let me check how many minutes we have here. Actually, we have
Four and something.
for 4 minutes. So Vincent, why don't you close us out with your thoughts on what we've been talking about today?
Well, this is really exciting because you and I have spoken a lot about having physicians gear up on knowledge of technology, especially AI, but also business skills. You know, if physicians are going to be department chairs of very large, you know, organizations, and they don't have an MBA or they don't have finance backgrounds, it's not easy to work with the management layer. So perhaps the physicians moving forward that are going to be going into these managerial quote roles as department chairs certainly would benefit from an MBA, or at least some certificate programs in finance or HR or in conflict resolution, etc. I think Francesca, is very well versed in that whole space. It'd be really interesting to have you on another podcast, Francesca, and talk a little detail about how business processes are going to be changed in healthcare workflows because of AI. So you'll be very busy in taking your clients and the consulting, I guess, that you do, and helping them migrate into the use of AI on their enhanced clinical workflows. So that's going to be a very exciting topic, perhaps for another podcast, Andrew.
Oh, of course, yes, whenever you want. I'm so happy to work with you guys. So
And why,
um,
last question, why is your English so excellent?
thank you so much. Well, because I work in the UK for 2 years and a half in Lincoln, near Nottingham. Yeah. So
Perfect. Excellent. Great, great. Well, thank you so much.
no, thanks to you guys. Really, it was a pleasure.
We'll
Thank you.
definitely be in touch. Have a great,
Definitely.
thanks for being
Thank
flexible
you.
with the time today also.
Don't worry about that at all. Thank you. Bye
Take
bye.
care.